Good evening. Today is March 1st, 2021, and this is the 41st episode of New Paradigms. I'm your host, Sargis Sangari. My guest today is Masako Ganaha. Masako is fast becoming the leading source of independent investigative journalism in Japan and now America on the subject of the Chinese Communist Party, CCP's information warfare against the world. Born in Okinawa, Ms. Ganaha attended the Waseda University in Tokyo and quickly gravitated towards investigative beyond standard corporate messaging. As an independent journalist, she grew disillusioned with the corporate media's inability to research topics that were considered politically controversial for their media outlets. Ms. Ganaha has been in the US for over the past 3 months to follow the election cycle, increasing violence in America, and the potential for civil unrest and civil war, illegal immigration, and of course the CCP's role in all of this and what it means for the people of Japan. She has recently been featured on Crossroads with Joshua Phillips due to her groundbreaking investigation that identified Antifa and other far leftist agent provocateurs being investigated for their links to leading the U.S. Capitol building attacks on January 6th. Ms. Ganaha's courage and also dedication to tell the truth no matter what meant she was one of the first to go public with that information in a major U.S. interview media outlet. She is also a background on Okinawa, which means that she has had a front row seat to the CCP's initial attempts by dividing Japan from the U.S. as allies and more tragically dividing Okinawa from Japan and putting Okinawans against themselves. She is finishing up her 3-month tour with my dear friend, Michael Yon, who I know to be the most experienced living combat correspondent. She is here to tell us about why Okinawans' issues are important to understand, both what is happening in the United States and between Japan and the U.S. It is wonderful to have you here, Gana. It's great to have you here as a friend of the show, and welcome. And hopefully over the next half hour, we could tell our audiences here what is the reality that is happening on the ground from your perspective.
Thank you very much. It is very, it's my honor to be able to appear on your show, Colonel Sangari. And thank you very much for having me to share what I've been researching related to US-Japan relationship. And specifically, I'm from Okinawa. It's a southern island. And Okinawa is a keystone at Pacific Ocean. So it's been always, Okinawa has a many, world is watching Okinawa. And so I really love to share what I've been studying because mainstream media is not telling us the truth. Yes, so.
Yeah, we have that problem here.
Yes.
We have that problem here. We usually don't get what we want from the mainstream media. I do know that we've had issues here, but you came here and did extensive coverage. And last time I saw you, I know you were actually on the southern border in the United States. If I may, if you could tell us a little bit about what your talk was. I know that you were on Epoch News. What was the specific issues that you saw when it came to the January 6th issues here in the United States, and then we can start looking at Okinawa specifically and the Chinese information operations.
Okay, on January 6th, I was at the Capitol, not inside, and I was there to see what's been going on, and I was very interested in how American conservatives fight against this massive election fraud or mainstream media. They've been covering everything that they do not want world to know, the truth. And so I was there and I was watching people taking pictures and I realized that people at the Capitol were just like a tourist. They were taking picture as if they were enjoying that they could be at the Capitol on historical day. They were not there to attack Capitol. And since I could not use my cell phone, I did not get any signal. So I did not know what was happening inside the Capitol. So I believe that many people at the Capitol even didn't realize what had been happening on that day. And they realized after they went back to home. So mainstream media has been calling what have been done at the Capitol as insurrection. But I don't believe that was insurrection. And we cannot analyze what happened because all the conservatives or people who have questioned on January 6th cannot even share information, or we are prohibited to address our own opinion. So I'm so worried about American conservatives who is trying to just seek the truth, but they are not allowed to see the fact or truth anymore. And maybe I don't want to be rude to Americans, but I would say I came to United States where I've always thought free country of freedom. But I feel like I'm in China, but I've never been to China, so I'm just this is from my just imagination. But you are not allowed to upload any video that you wanted to share to people, or you cannot share picture and your bank information is shared with government without your permission. So I'm so worried about United States right now.
No, look, you're not being insulting. You're just pointing out the fact, and unfortunately, some people have an issue with it. I tell folks on both sides, you could go far left, far right. What happens is sometimes they just think in their own little echo chamber, we call it. And unfortunately, anything that comes from the outside that disrupts it, it really causes problems for them. And usually, instead of sitting down and trying to say, maybe we need to readjust, they lash out on issues. So that's really what is happening. We deal with the human character. It doesn't matter where you are. You could be in the United States and Japan and China. It depends on how you've been trained and raised to be able to handle those issues. In the United States, the fight over freedom of speech was very big for us, has still is a big part of our character. Unfortunately, there's a lot of what we call the socialist element that has crept in over the years, being educated that you have to give up more of those rights. And usually that doesn't work out well for nations. So, what you're seeing and what you're saying is just the reality of what we have already experienced in the U.S. It's unfortunate, but I think that you have plenty of patriots that on both sides, actually, who want to see that we need to continue to expand our freedoms, not take away more of them, to be able to have the government that is of the people and for the people. But I know that you have seen what an advanced possible timeline of what happens when China has gotten more of a information operational ability on the ground in a nation. They do affect us here. We know that recently I had written an article and provided a briefing to the National Security Council 3 years to the day before they moved into Burma with the effects that they had. I was in Japan in 2015 in February, where we had briefed the Japanese government on outside influences in Japan, to include at that time ISIS and others. And China was still there, even at that briefing, trying to influence and see what America was sharing, even in that small venue, from the experts in terrorism. As I was there, Michael Yon was there, and where we were briefing on how China information does affect us globally going forward. But I do want to start with a question for you, is looking at Okinawa. If you could tell us about the situation in Okinawa today regarding the Chinese information operations and the Japanese communists. A lot of people do not know that there's Japanese communists and fascists that are working together also within the borders of Japan and Okinawa from a Japanese perspective. Tell us what is happening there.
Okay, so in Okinawa, we
Yes.
have always had this big issue related to CCP information operation. And Okinawa is a border island. So CCP is claiming that Okinawa is their land, their territory. And it is just a huge lie. But we have same structure of information operation here. Local newspaper, we have two big newspaper. They both seem to support Chinese claim. And of course, mainstream media from mainland Japan, they always say that Okinawa is oppressed by Japanese government and US military, which is totally false. And one of the big issue on Okinawa is US base. But I have to be careful when I introduce those issues because in my opinion, US bases are not the problem or issue. Those who lie to us and try to create conflict or operate misinformation and disinformation tactics to split Okinawa from Japan are the problem. But they always look American bases and Japanese government are the problem that we have. So I've been fighting against those misinformation and disinformation. And Okinawa is very unique place because, like I told you before, in the beginning, Okinawa is located in very important place, which is expressed by US before as keystone of the Pacific. So China wants Okinawa, trying to, so what they want to do is to get rid of US bases and Japanese self-defense force in order to invade easily. And they're using mainstream media, local newspapers to make Okinawan people turn back against mainland Japan. And Okinawan people are very naive, so they don't know that mainstream media or newspaper tells lies. They are very credulous people. So I've been trying to warn people, yes.
No, look, it becomes difficult. I tell people all the time, always verify and validate the information you're getting and see what the source is. A lot of the major U.S. papers, news outlets, what you might call mainstream media, which a lot of people don't even watch them, are really tied to Chinese conglomerates and companies. So it becomes very difficult to get anything done here when it comes to their information operations. And it is not the fault, I would say, of those conglomerates that work for the Chinese government that are trying to influence information operations here. It's the fault of the American newspapers, or it might be the fault of the newspapers in the countries that they are, where they are so beholden to the money that is being provided from China that they are actually willing to forego even the national security of a nation, whether it be United States or Japan. I know you mentioned the American basing. Me, of course, serving in the U.S. military for 20 plus years. I do understand the strategic importance of Okinawa. And I guess I would ask, I know one of the questions that I was looking at asking was how do these operations really relate to the protests you see on the U.S. basing in Okinawa? But we have a video here that I want to introduce that really for our viewers who don't know, this could be on a daily basis of what the troops in Okinawa are facing and what the people in Okinawa have to deal with as they try to get into the U.S. military basing for just on a daily basis. So if you could introduce that video, and I want your perspective on it.
警察の連中と抗議集団がいますね。たくさん渡っていますね、警察の人も。かなり混乱していますね。声を荒げていますね。声を上げていますね。大きい声で罵声を浴びせていますね。ひどいよ。あんたひどいよ。そういうことをいろいろ言ってますね。これが実際そうなんですよ。こういうことやってますね。これサリンのやつや。何のつもりか。何のつもりか。何のつもりか。こういうことやってるんですよ。何のつもりか。何のつもりかべ。何のつもりかべ。こんな感じです。何の権利があるんや。何の権利があるんや。ドア開けろ。ドア開けろ。誰様だお前。引き出せ。引き出せ。ドア開けろ。バカだな。返せ。ドアも開けてきます。窓も開けてきます。こういう状態です。カメラは下げます。
Masako, I'm going to let you talk about that video, but CCP definitely knows how to intimidate and organize information operations against our allies.
Yes, the video that you've just watched is taken in front of Camp Shrub, which is Marine base. It is in Nago City, where I'm from. And the reason why I introduced you this video is because we can see the similarity. Here, Antifa or BLM, in my hometown, people who claim that they want to protect human rights, or people who like to say peace, they actually like to attack people. And whoever says or acts against them or they do not agree with, they just attack people. And this is, you can see the man with a hat, big hat, and with a microphone. He is the leader who leads those crowds. Those protesters are from Okinawa, and we based on our research, we found out that many people are from mainland Japan. They are not the local people, but they claim that they are the local people and they are against US bases, but that's just a fake. And,
no, we've seen that here. We've seen that here in protests, that where you have outsiders move from city to city being paid for to conduct protests. And even the people who are on the ground say that actually these people are outsiders. But I would ask you, I guess, we saw the members of the JDF, the Japanese Defense Forces on the ground there. How are they handling it from your perspective? Because some have criticized that the JDF really hasn't fulfilled its role when it comes to protecting Japan. By really allowing that essentially some people call the Chinese Tet colonialism to really take over Okinawa. And you being an individual who was born in Okinawa, and that Okinawa is very is your home, is where your ancestors were born, where you want to continue your traditions. What is your perspective on that? Has the JDF done its job
yes.
or no?
I would, I'm afraid to say, but they haven't, and they do not have enough fund to do their job. It's because of our constitution. And I'm also need to say that Japanese government is refused to fight or resolve those problems. Whenever they confront those problems, they would say, oh, we have deepest sympathy to Okinawan people. And here is the money to help Okinawans. That's not how Japanese government should solve those problems. But they've been doing same thing over and over again. Just say, I'm sorry to Okinawan people, which they should have not done anything wrong, and they just give money. So this becomes a whole apologizing problem that we have. So local people, conservative people like me, always tell Japanese government, even to we would do many gatherings and ask Japanese government to come to Okinawa and explain to us why there are many American bases and Japanese self-defense forces. They've never explained to us that China, Japan, specifically Okinawa, is under attack by CCP. They are so afraid of Chinese government that they cannot even warn us that we are in this difficult situation. So I feel like Japanese government are not even fighting. And
go ahead. Let me ask you a question. I mean, we've seen this. There's nothing that you're saying that I haven't seen in other countries. I guess my question would be very simple. Is Japan capable of defending itself yet? Or does it have to still get to a point where it needs to be strong enough and it still needs that ally on the ground? I guess that would be my question if I was in Japan, whether or not there's a need for U.S. basing there. But we're very much linked together. In 2014, when the issues of the Middle East erupted with ISIS operating in Syria and Iraq, we know that in October of 2014, the Bank of Japan bought a lot of American debt when Obama was in office, and they did so really toward the protection of the United States, which as soon as Russia, which is a member of the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, realized that that had taken place, and China being the leader of the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, where both you have Russia and Iran as part of that axis of evil, if you want to call it, as we use in the U.S., tied to the SCO, was able to push its way into Syria. And it did so because it realized that America cannot really fight on multiple fronts, given the fact that its economy wasn't in a good standing. And it used its connections with North Korea to really pressure against Japan during that time. I'm not sure if people see in Okinawa and Japan the larger link analysis of how the U.S. and U.S. and Japan need each other, and how if they're not strong economically and financially and military-wise, in this case, within the Southwest Asia, that they're always going to be really behind the power curve when it comes to information operations. The first battle in the CCP's North Korea and Japan communist information war was said to have been fought in Okinawa with the First Stone propaganda movement and also the Comfort Woman movement, which I know that you and Mike have had time to talk about. And Michael Young actually briefed the Comfort Woman issues and debunked a lot of those issues in Japan in 2015. But can you elaborate a little bit more on that, especially on the First Stone propaganda and how Okinawa is a central piece to affecting Japan's security overall?
Okay, before I answer this question, I would like to say that many conservatives, Japanese conservatives, are very much rely on United States, and it's kind of shame to say because I'm Japanese citizen, and I know that we have to be able to protect ourselves. So we have to work on our constitution and work on Article 9, which prohibits us having potential to fight against invasion. And then there are many information operation going on in Okinawa, and one of which is Comfort Women Chinese information operation. And first monument was built in Miyako Island. Miyako Island is one of the little islands in Okinawa. And this monument is written in several languages. And China is, after Tiananmen Square massacre, they realized that they need world to pay attention to other issues because the massacre was so severe, the world has criticizing them. So they created this information war concerning about comfort women issue. And first, they claimed that 200 women were kidnapped from Jeju Island. Japanese soldier kidnapped 200 women to Japan. And then they changed the number, multiplied by 10, so 2,000 women. And they next said 20,000 women. And then they increased more, saying 200,000 women were kidnapped. And then they multiplied by 400,000 women. But they realized that it's way too over to make people believe their lies. So they just stick with 200,000 women. And Japanese journalists who wrote about this issue admit that he made a lie. So there are many details about this comfort women issue, but the fact is that it's Chinese Communist Party's information operation to distract world's attention from their massacre. And they've been building the... Go ahead. And they've been building many statues all over the world, including United States. But the first monument was built in Okinawa.
No, look, there's nothing new to that. If you do anything against the Chinese Communist Party information operations here, they will attack you, first of all, and with their media outlets by saying you're racist against the Chinese. Then they'll deflect it and say it must be a Russian operation, which Russia is also a member of the SCO, and China is the lead, so they will probably defer and take their orders from China anyway when it comes to Shanghai Cooperation Organization. And then they'll turn around and they will blame it on the previous administration. So this is just the way you do it. You fight against it, you deflect it to somewhere else, and then you tie it to failed policies, as they would like to believe, to previous administrations. We've seen China's operations. I know that Mike had broken down the entire Japanese naval fleet. And just looking at how many Japanese ships they had, the tonnage they had, what was in operations, the facts on the books when Japan was conducting a war in the Pacific, and that literally they would not have enough tonnage of ships to be able to dedicate them to the number of the comfort women that are being discussed as being used for this type of a propaganda. That would mean that Japan would have had to pull all their naval ships from the war with the U.S. fighting in all the other areas in Pacific, just to be able to use them for comfort women issues, which was not a national strategy for them to begin with. But, sometimes, unfortunately, the facts get lost in the propaganda. And I'm hoping that the people of Okinawa get a chance to really take a look at the facts in itself, and also in Japan and in the United States, before they make these type of decisions on these issues. I'm not sure. I guess I would ask the question. That kind of leads to the question: are the Japanese people aware that there is a colonization taking place in Okinawa, or would you agree with that, or you would not agree with that assessment?
I think that many Japanese people, many Okinawan people are still sleeping. They do not realize that what is happening around Okinawa, and they just, like I said before, they are very credulous people. They do not know what is going on. Okinawa is very beautiful place. We have beautiful beaches, and it's very like Florida. So many people are still sleeping. That's why I'm trying hard to wake people up. And I think if we keep doing the same thing, like Japanese government don't fight mainstream media, local newspaper, just propaganda from CCP, then we will be like Hong Kong or Uyghurs. They are doing the same thing all over the world. So we say that we will be next.
Maybe the other approach would be if there's any similarities that could be pointed out between Okinawa and Hokkaido colonial efforts by the Chinese. I'm not sure if there's any similarities. Could you explain if they are? Maybe that would wake them up. I'm not sure that might be a way ahead or not.
Oh, thank you for mentioning about this. Hokkaido is the prefecture located in northern part of Japan, and so it's the border prefecture also. And there are similar information operation going on. So one of the way to split the country is using indigenous local uniqueness. So for example, I'm from Okinawa, so we say Okinawan, but of course I'm Japanese citizen, Japanese. And people live in Hokkaido, they are of course Japanese, but they make us like a indigenous people, meaning different race, so that we would be able to claim our rights as indigenous people. And they are trying to encourage us using our own dialect, which is originated from Japanese language. So there are people called Ainu. They are said to be indigenous people in Hokkaido, but they came way after Japanese people came to Hokkaido. So actually they are not the indigenous people who would be able to claim that they were discriminated against and their culture were cancelled. And so in Okinawa, local politicians are clearly following this propaganda. When they present in front of people, they first start talking with Okinawan dialect and saying hello. We say konnichiwa, but they say they say hello konnichiwa in Okinawan dialect, which they don't have to do it. It's not necessary, but they are creating this movement. And they even have made an ATM speaking in Okinawan dialect. Or people who work at Okinawan government, they have to take a test on Okinawan dialect. So this is getting very serious. And I understand that we have to protect our history or dialect, but it's not a tool to divide Okinawa and Japan. But that's they've been doing, and same thing is happening in Hokkaido, northern part of Japan, southern part of Japan, to create division within Japan.
Well, you know, it's not supposed to be, but it's a tool that could be used to divide. That's the one thing you do with insurgencies and information operations. I've fought in insurgencies. I've actually led them on behalf of the nation in certain areas. And the more you could divide, the easier you could conquer. It's unfortunate, but like I said, in the case of China, China will continue to prosper as long as there's foreign money coming in to support its companies. If you could go after their money, eventually you could really see the chinks in those armors that China has overall. Recently, just a few days ago, you had the ambassador for Italy in the Congo who was killed along with a couple of his securities. He was passing humanitarian aid out, trying to support Western's ability to be able to affect the Congo. And you have a lot of weapons that are from China that end up in the hands of the various different groups in the Congo that ended up claiming the life of this ambassador in the areas that the Chinese were trying to use humanitarian aid to affect their positioning and being able to control the elements that are needed for future technologies, specifically when it comes to what the world is looking at possibly having as future technologies that need those mineral deposits that are in the Congo. And the Straits of Malacca, which is where Burma is, like I said, 3 years to the date plus of the Burmese coup is when I had provided a paper to the National Security Council stating that China is working with the Burmese military and actually named General Halang as a key cog to it, using their companies to try to affect that change. So China will try to force itself, bring oil through the Middle East, which is oil that Japan also needs. And we know that in Afghanistan, there was an attack that took place against Japanese mining capabilities and companies. And when the U.S. did its investigation, now that everybody knows about it, is open source, we found out that the money that went to the Taliban insurgents actually came through China. So China was trying to get its own footprint there. When the Japanese left, guess who ended up picking up the location to try to do its mining? It was the Chinese. So I guess I would ask a last question. What is it that you Americans and Japanese can learn from what is happening in Okinawa? But before that, I would say that China is not going to hold back and could care less about Japan and Okinawa. And if the Japanese and the Okinawans don't care about Japan and Okinawa and do not want to be united to ensure that they fight against the Japanese information operation, then at the end, they're all going to end up having to be subservient, unfortunately, to the Chinese in the region, because even the U.S., there will be at a time where it might not be able to affect the security and the prosperity of Japan, which is reliant on Middle East oil and other places for its survival of its island, if China has taken those steps and blocked all those avenues. So what is it that the U.S. and Japan can learn overall from you have just talked to us about when it comes to what is happening in Okinawa?
Okay, thank you. I think no matter what they say, those leftist mainstream media or CCP operation agents, we have to realize that we are not against each other and we are allies. And I really want to thank Americans or American soldiers who serve on U.S. bases in Okinawa. And because those leftist protesters, they go in front of the bases and then they protest every day, and they are doing hate speech every day. They will attack their cars, their families, the school buses. So I feel so sorry for those who were attacked, those people who do not represent Okinawa nor Japan. And I would like to mention one thing at last, that there is a Okinawa Prefecture Government Washington DC office in DC. And this office is formed to do information operation against Japan and United States. Their purpose is to get rid of US bases from Okinawa, which benefits the CCP the most. So the office is there, and they are saying that Okinawan people are oppressed and being attacked, or many accidents, many crime led by American soldier. They are exaggerating what's happening and creating problems, trying to split Okinawa and Japan and United States. So I think that US government and American citizens should not allow this office to operate in your country. So if possible, I hope that this office are to be shut down.
Well, we're gonna do what we can from our end. I just came back from my DC trip yesterday, and when we go back again sometime in March, we will make sure we look into the office operations and see if there's any questions that members of Congress have for us. I think at the end of the day, if there's a strong relationship, both economic and political relationship between our countries, we'd be much better off knowing that we have to work together to defeat what China is trying to do on a global stage. I will tell you that I have a friend of mine, good friend of mine, that we got commissioned together going back now almost 30 years ago. And his dad married a woman from Okinawa. And he's a dear friend of mine, and we have had history together. And I do know that history is something that can never be, regardless of where you might be in the political process or in careers or life, ever be breached because of the type of person he is, and the wonderful mom that welcomed me into her house. And that history needs to be defended at all costs. At least I will defend it from my ability and perspective. It was wonderful to have you here, Masako. If people want to learn more about you, where can they go, and what they can look at, and how can they help you if need be while you're here?
Please check my Twitter. I hope it's still there, and I have my website, which you are looking at right now. And you can see my YouTube channel. I do many live streams and interviews. Recently, I've been doing many interviews in English. So please check my YouTube channel and Twitter and my website. Thank you.
Well, thank you for being here. Thank you for coming here in the service of our nations, both Japan and the United States. The time away from family and friends, and I know how difficult it was on the southern border. I saw one of the videos where you and Mike had to escape an incident that took place there. So you do put your life on the line here. And with that said, is there any questions you have for us? Or is there any questions you have for me? If not, I'll give you the last word.
Yes, actually, I would like to ask you one question. So during your visit 2015, you informed many information regarding CCP to Ministry of Interior and PSIA. So based on your visit to Japan, what was your impression?
Well, first of all, I have to say you do pretty good as far as investigating journalism about knowing who I talked to, but that's a positive in itself. No, I did talk to the Ministry of Interior and the PSIA of Japan. You know, when we were there, it was an ISIS issue. We were able to help identify a ISIS cell that was operating in Japan. So Japan is not even it's not isolated from those type of incidents. And I was happy that the Near East Center for Strategic Engagement were able to help the PSI in that aspect to identify those cells and secure the Japanese people. But the biggest thing on with the Ministry of Interior, and I cannot get into the details, of course, of what we had talked about, but it was, again, how to counter China. And if you get a chance, I can't talk about it, but you could contact the Ministry of Interior and say, what were the recommendations that Colonel Sangari gave you here specifically on how to counter China? And I think if I was hoping if they had taken some more aggressive steps there, it could have probably put them in a much more of a leveraged position possibly with China. But all you could do is give recommendations, right? To your allies. So it's going to be a long fight, but it's good to have young ladies like you in this fight, working with guys like Michael Yon, and even you're welcome to come on our shows. I will invite you to come back again and tell us what is happening, where have you been in the future, and all we could do is get the word out and hope for the best that the politicians and our elected leaders are able to use our information to leverage against what the Chinese Communist Party is doing in the region. And by the way, I actually did write an article in Japan Forward just because before Japan went into a lockdown. And the problem I had, that article was written a month prior, February of 2019 or 2020. But we weren't able to really get into the articles here because of the Chinese influence on our media. But I was able to thank Japan Forward to publish it, so people can go actually type up my last name, Sangari, Japan Forward, and they will see the article on the Chinese Communist Party virus and its effect, how it affected us globally. But again, Masako, I hope that answered your question. And if it has, we welcome you to come back again to see us.
Yes, thank you very much. May I say one last message?
Yes, you have the floor.
Thank you very much. During this visit, I heard from many conservative people, America first. At the same time, they respected my country, Japan. They said Japan first. So the reason why there are many Trump supporters in Japan, they were still having protests against election fraud after around inauguration, actually, was because we Japanese people saw President Trump as an ideal leader who stands for the country. We need prime minister who has strong leadership like President Trump. And it's not about the person Trump, but it's about the leadership who would protect the country. So I really learned a lot from conservative people here in the United States. And so I would like to encourage American conservative, and I would like to also thank people here. So America first and Japan first. Together we make a great world.
Outstanding. I agree on that. With all that said, thank you very much again, Masako. We're going to have you back again. Stay safe, safe travel, and God bless. And this is New Paradigms.
Thank you very much.